Welcome back. We're joined again by Shane Keary. Thank you for joining us again, Shane.
No problem, Kerry.
We're talking on this session about accumulation. Now, you've helped us before with risk and estate planning. It only goes to show that you run a holistic financial planning advice here at Keary Financial Management.
I guess it does, yes.
Now, we're talking about Fred and John. We developed Fred and John's story in the previous series, and we're hoping that you might help us understand a little bit more about how Fred and John have structured their accumulation, maybe what they should have done, what they could have done, and what they might do. What are your views about Fred and John's structure in relation to accumulating wealth?
Without getting into a real comparison of these two gentlemen, that's probably not the point of the exercise, but there is clearly something wrong here. What Fred has done is I've sort of nicknamed him Frugal Fred because he's got control of what he's doing, where John just hasn't, and who knows how he got to where he is, but that's where he is. He's got an income that should support his lifestyle, but because of his level of debt, it's just not going to do that. Until he addresses that, in terms of further accumulation of wealth, he's got to address that before he can move forward. So that's probably the first thing that needs to be done for John.
Okay, let's stay with John for a bit. Yeah. Our previous show on debt, we discussed the fact that probably he shouldn't have qualified for the amount of debt he has on property, and he shouldn't probably have qualified for the lease on the Porsche. But he's a relationship bloke, he's a merchant banker, he knows who to talk to.
Knows the right people.
And if a Porsche dealer's going to sell him a new car every 2 years, then he mightn't have ticked the boxes he needed to. But it doesn't matter, that's unimportant. He's in that situation. Is it a good thing to talk about accumulation for him, or how he might better structure his accumulation? Look, or are there more important issues for him?
The way I work is to call a spade a spade. So if I had a client like that, I would be certainly wanting to make sure that he was serious about what he's aiming to do before we went any further, which means speaking frankly about your situation, and his situation is hopeless. So he's in dire straits if he doesn't fix it. You mentioned the Porsche. That's an obvious place to start, and I did some rough calculations on that, and if he did get something a little bit down market, if you like, still in the $100,000 mark, rather than the Porsche, then the sort of money he'd free up, which is $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, would give him the capacity to pay his non-deductible debt down, the debt on his own home. That alone would save him something like $600,000 over the period of the loan, and would pull it down from, if it's a 25-year term now, down to something more like 10 years. Now, $600,000 saved, if you like, you could consider that a reasonable investment for what he's actually done. So that gives him an out. It's an immediate out. For him to reverse his negative cash flow position and move forward. Well, I suppose the other side of this is that Fred also has a situation that, in some respects, I wouldn't be encouraging him to spend more on himself, but he is, I think, probably not being too kind to himself in terms of where he's heading. But that's they're personal goals, and we'd have to discuss those just to see.
Well, according to Fred's story, he eats well, just that he likes to cook it, and obviously his girlfriend is simpatico with his views, which is nice.
Yeah. If it all works, but before we move forward in terms of wealth accumulation for Fred, we'd have to discuss those things. Where's he heading? Is a family in the near future? Does his car need upgrading? I get the impression that's sort of on its last days, perhaps. Those sorts of issues need to be addressed. So those immediate needs that are their known needs, with a $34,000 a year excess income, surplus income, then he's in a position to address those things, and probably still move further into wealth accumulation and hopefully diversifying into perhaps share portfolios. On those numbers, he'd be eligible for additional borrowings.
He's got a lot of equity in property that's actually effectively sitting in a bank and paying no interest. That's what equity in property does. Would you think that some way to release that equity would be a good thing for him to do at this point, or sort out his marriage situation first, or I don't know. As I say all the time, he's a figment of my imagination. We can make him do what we like, but we'll try and keep it real.
The way the numbers stack up now, he certainly could borrow additional funds. Whether that's a good idea or not will depend on what his more immediate known plans are. So you can't. I wouldn't be looking at one without the other. Clearly, if he's planning a family in the next year or two, then we take that into account. You don't throw yourself into a geared situation that is essentially a long-term investment strategy when you know that there's a good chance that you can't follow through with it. You could end up like John.
Yeah.
So everyone's different. It's what personal advice is about. It's about getting the details of that person that you're with and structuring a plan for their financial future around their particular goals and their capacity to meet financial goals.
And that's exactly the point. It's well made. So we look at Fred and we say make a lot of equity, gear to the buggery, buy a share portfolio, leverage that as much as you can, particularly the way the markets are. They're very low, might be a good time to buy. And that looks on the surface of it as to be an ideal approach, but there's a person underneath this as well. And if he has ambitions to build his business, if his piece of software is coming along, he might need money. If he wants to more formalise his relationship, all of these decisions which look like they're perfect are wrong. And what it says clearly is that every solution or strategy in financial advice depends on the goals of the person who you're speaking to.
The individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, look, Shane, thank you very much again. Your insights have been very valuable.
Thanks, Kerry.
We'll catch you after the break. We're doing a reverse interview, and if we don't pick up the questions you need there, you know the story. Ask a question on the blog. See you after the break.